leaders as well was there for all to see, Ambassador Muni, today when there was a very warm embrace between Modi and Macron. Now, body language, of course, also has to be read, and that also says a lot. Today's meeting and hug did say a lot as well, Ambassador Muni. How important has been the two leaders' chemistry in particular, and how much have the two personalities also, helmed and taken these ties to a whole new close level?
Well, I would suggest you that our Prime Minister's in our Prime Minister's diplomatic toolkit, the personal equation is a very vital factor. And I think he uses it to the best of his advantage. This is not new that he establishes a personal warmth with the leadership on the other side he's talking to or negotiating with. But let me add a caveat here, that actually the relationships develop on the basis of mutual interests, not only on personal equations. We have seen the personal equation between Prime Minister Modi and Trump was absolutely great for some years back, and look what we are facing in terms of the US is concerned. So I will value personal relationship, but not beyond a limit. And I think when we talk of Indo-Pacific, not only Indo-Pacific, I would say look at the whole world, in which India today has the kind of a population and the rate of growth. The Indian economy still is not at the top level. Of course, it is from fourth to it is sliding to sixth or whatever else it is because of this figure. But the fact lies that potentially Indian market is most attractive today in whole of Asia. You can look at everyone. Therefore, everybody is looking at Indian market. Almost everybody. Why we have so much of the FTAs are now coming up with Europe, and France cannot neglect it. Therefore, it's a question of mutual interest that the two are tying up. Now, you're talking about, the general was talking about submarines. I remember, decades earlier, the Russians were training us in the nuclear submarines. And we have started developing submarine program for a long time. The West has now come up, and we still have to see actually to what extent technology transfer takes place, because that is very critical. Joint manufacturing has several dimensions, and this is not the time to go into details into them. But the most critical aspect of any joint manufacturing is the technological component. And it is on the technological component that the shyness and hesitation comes up amongst the various business interests. Now, we should also, I must add one more factor here, that while collaborating with a country like France, we should also be extremely careful in promoting the private business. The Anil Ambani experience has not been a great one. And to some extent, it was resented in France. I think in future, we must be very careful whether the private businesses which we are bringing on the board must be competent to handle the area in which they are involved.
Let me quickly draw you back in here, Major General Sivac, also on the fact that India and France have a lot of convergence as well in terms of world outlook. We were speaking earlier, of course, on on our shared views on peace, of course, for the Middle East, and on Ukraine. Also, this policy against a weaponization of trade. Free trade has been spoken about by both sides, given what we're seeing around us. And also today, cooperative innovation and cooperative AI has been spoken to, in which many countries are seeking to restrict AI or restrict technology transfer. Here, cooperation is being emphasized on by Modi and Macron. How significant is that?
Absolutely. I think, Uday, first of all, one must understand that we have a long way to go as far as the technology is concerned, as far as the artificial intelligence, semiconductor, chips are concerned, quantum computing is concerned. which is the country ready to transfer the technology or ready to cooperate and coordinate with us? Not too many. The France is the country where we can depend. And there are so many similarities between India and France. And very rightly brought out by Ambassador also. Now, the France is a country which is not dictated by US. It is an independent country. It always stands for a peace. It always stands for an independent vision. And India and France vision almost is matching, and that's why our relationship are growing from strength to strength. And remember that we had in pipeline number of other aircraft we could have gone for it. Why Rafale? Because Rafale is more dependable. 4.5 generation aircraft were transfer to some extent the technology and also able to produce in India itself. Not too many countries are accepting that terms and condition. That MRO, maintenance, repair and overhaul facility will be also in India itself. Otherwise, you remember that if you buy American aircrafts and all your aircraft have to go back there for repair and refurbishment. So that's a very important thing. Then another important point is that you want to also produce the missiles which are there. That is Meteor missile, Scalp missile, Hammer missile. France has not agreed with any other country other than India that yes, we can jointly produce them in India itself. So I suppose there are a number of plus points when we talk about India-France relationship. And I said earlier that the trade is almost about $15 billion, where it is almost equal. Import and export by and large, slightly more export done by France. But there's a lot of scope whether India can also do more on textile, pharmaceutical, jam, jewelry, and also leather goods. At the same time, France is looking, as far as India is concerned, a huge market and huge market for investment. So therefore, the point is both the countries stand to gain. And that is why the friendship is growing very strong, because India needs France and France needs India.
Absolutely. No, it is certainly, of course, something that that is a two-way relationship. And as we continue to see visuals of this meeting, which is currently underway there in Nice, I have to come to you also, Ambassador Muni, on also, the relationship with France, of course, is very important. But we've also seen this closening of overall India-EU relations as well. It has, of course, culminated in a free trade agreement being signed as well. But overall, what has defined the India-EU partnership in the last couple of years, and what has led also to these two entities also getting so close?
Well, as I said, that we must look at the Indo-French relationship, the present moment, I would say, in the overall context of our relationship with Europe, which has become far more warmer in the last 2 years, largely because we want to diversify our sources of technology and our trade areas. Now, the FTA with the European Union moved much faster the moment we got the shock from the US. Just see the relationship between the two. And at the same time, we also started having diversifying our trade relations with other Asian countries, whether it in the Gulf or even to the extent with Australia and various other countries. So this should be seen in our overall policy effort to diversify our trade relations, largely because there are issues which cannot be totally depended upon. And we have got shocked so far as trade matters are concerned, and the present day's world, when the supply chains are so extensively disrupted, you need diversified sources on which you can rely upon. We have seen that experience, we have felt that experience so far as energy is concerned. But it is not limited to energy. It is limited to all other aspects of the trade. And therefore, the trade facilitation with the European Union, which you are mentioning, is very critical there. And that's why we have proceeded. And not only we, as I mentioned earlier, the Europe also has proceeded very fast on that. And look at the way in which the European Union's president and other representatives have gone to India, and they made kind of speeches there. that how much they need India. So the potential of Indian economy to absorb as much of technology, as much of investment is now becoming, more and more clear to some of these established centers of world economy earlier, like Europe. And they are now realizing. Therefore, you have this kind of a change which is taking place. And I think this is a natural part. I think gradually almost every country, the countries like Saudi Arabia, the countries in the Gulf, they realize that they must diversify their economy. And in that diversification, India is a major factor. So there is no way Europe can really ignore
And
that
we're also
dimension.
seeing, Ambassador Mooney, people-to-people ties grow closer as well. Education is going to be spoken on, I think higher education as well. So there's a focus on how to get more, French institutes to India, and also, of course, how to get more French students to Indian higher education institutes as well. Of course, people-to-people ties involves cultural aspects as well, involves, of course, more tourism as well, and business ties as well. Cooperation will lead to more employability and more employees from India going to France as well.
No, France can also now is willing to absorb more of the service sector from Indian side. You're talking about people-to-people relations which will grow along with the economic cooperation between the two sides. And on people-to-people level, may I remind you that we had one prime minister who was very fond of speaking in France. She knew French language, Mrs. Indira Gandhi. And on some of her visits, she tried and delivered her addresses in France in the French language. So this tie at the people level, at the language level, at the culture level is not absolutely new. Of course, it has to be widened and strengthened.
Absolutely. Let me, in fact, quickly pick up on another aspect now as well, coming in of this visit. Prime Minister